In 1925, the United States Army War College published a comprehensive report that was intended to provide a definitive assessment on the subject. This academic document was filled with racist pseudoscience, and its conclusions were unequivocal. It stated that the African American population possessed an inherently inferior mentality, weak character, and a fundamentally subservient nature. The report further declared that black men lacked the necessary intelligence for technical roles, the courage for combat, and the leadership capabilities for command positions. This was presented as a settled, biological fact. This report became the official justification for a segregated military, erecting a wall of prejudice built upon a foundation of falsehoods. One must therefore ponder a critical question. In a remarkable turnaround, the very same military that had once dismissed a group of pilots as inferior, soon found itself desperately relying on their skills to protect its bomber crews from the formidable Nazi air defenses. How did these men, once branded as inferior, become the most sought-after, revered, and effective bomber escorts in the 15th Air Force? The answer lies in a tale of two parallel wars, one against the Luftwaffe in the skies over Europe, and the other against the crushing weight of prejudice in their own country. To triumph in the first war, they had to be exceptional, but to win the second, they had to be flawless. This is the story of how the German Luftwaffe came to fear the very pilots they had been conditioned to dismiss. The Tuskegee Airmen's story is one of resilience and triumph. These men, who painted their planes a bold crimson red, rewrote history with their bravery and skill. Their journey began not in the cockpit, but in the political arena. As war loomed in the late 1930s, civil rights leaders relentlessly challenged the Roosevelt administration's hypocrisy. How could America champion democracy abroad while denying it to millions of its own citizens? Their persistent pressure finally yielded results in 1941. When the War Department announced the creation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. However, this was not hailed as a groundbreaking milestone, but rather dubbed the Tuskegee Experiment, a telling choice of words that betrayed the skepticism and doubt surrounding this endeavor. The military authorities dispatched the cadets to a hastily constructed, segregated airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama, under the command of white officers who largely shared the views expressed in a 1925 report. The odds were stacked against them from the outset. However, the architects of this experiment made a grave miscalculation. They failed to comprehend that subjecting men to immense pressure does not always break them. Sometimes, it forges diamonds. The training regimen at Tuskegee was brutal, a crucible designed to eliminate any hint of imperfection. The cadets understood that they were not just flying for themselves, but for the future of their entire race within the armed forces. A single failure could be used as a pretext to shut down the entire program. Driven by this weighty responsibility, they pushed themselves beyond all reasonable limits. The Tuskegee Airmen, an elite group of African American pilots, faced extraordinary challenges in their quest to earn their wings. While their white counterparts in other programs flew around 200 hours to receive their pilot's licenses, the Tuskegee cadets were required to complete a grueling 300 hours of flight time. The attrition rate was staggering, with a staggering 60% of cadets failing the program, far exceeding the 40% washout rate in white-dominated programs. The instructors, led by the formidable Colonel Noel Parrish, demanded a level of precision and discipline that was almost inhumane. They were not merely training pilots. They were molding a select group of exceptional individuals, a powerful rebuttal to the long-held lies that had oppressed them for so long. When the first graduates, led by the stoic and brilliant Captain Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., finally shipped out to North Africa in April 1943, they were no mere rookies. They were some of the most rigorously trained pilots in the world, and Davis himself embodied the struggle and triumph of the Tuskegee Airmen. The son of America's first black general, he had endured 4 years of silence at West Point, where no white cadet would speak to him outside of official duties. Despite the institutional racism he faced, he had weathered the storm with unbreakable dignity. Now, he was leading his men into a war where the enemy in front of them might be less hostile than the allies beside them. Their arrival in Tunisia was a rude awakening. Attached to the 33rd Fighter Group commanded by Colonel William Meyer, they encountered a man who saw their presence as a waste of time and resources. Meyer made no effort to hide his contempt, equipping them with second-hand, worn-out P-40 Warhawk fighters, tough and rugged, but already obsolete and outclassed by the German Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s. To add insult to injury, he assigned them to the military equivalent of dish duty. The pilots of the 99th Pursuit Squadron found themselves relegated to routine patrols over the Mediterranean, far from the real action of the war. This was a deliberate strategy by their superiors to prevent them from proving their worth, so that the experiment of an all-black fighter unit could be deemed a failure. For weeks, the airmen flew these frustrating, seemingly pointless missions, with morale steadily declining. They were trained warriors, but were being treated like children unfit for combat. However, on July 2, 1943, everything changed. While escorting B-25 bombers on a raid against a German airfield in Sicily, First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall spotted two Focke-Wulf 190 fighters diving on the bombers. This was the moment the pilots had been waiting for. Without hesitation, Hall broke formation and maneuvered his P-40 fighter into a tight turn, positioning himself to engage the German aircraft. He squeezed the trigger, unleashing a stream of 50 caliber tracer rounds that stitched across the enemy's fuselage. Moments later, he reported firing a long burst, watching his tracers penetrate the second aircraft. As the enemy fighter began to turn, it suddenly fell off and headed straight into the ground. A black American pilot flying an inferior plane had just shot down one of the Luftwaffe's elite fighters. When Hall landed back at the base, the news spread like wildfire. The black ground crews, mechanics, and armorers who had endured the same daily insults as the pilots erupted in celebration. They lifted Hall onto their shoulders, parading him around the airfield. They now had a tangible victory that no one could take away from them. That afternoon, a single swastika was painted on the side of Hall's Warhawk. The Tuskegee Airmen's first aerial victory marked a significant breakthrough, shattering the prevailing prejudices. However, this solitary triumph did little to silence the skeptics. Colonel Ma's scathing reports, culminating in a damning assessment, threatened the very existence of the Tuskegee program. Claiming the 99th Pursuit Squadron lacked aggression and were timid in combat, he recommended their permanent reassignment to coastal patrol duties, deeming the experiment a failure. This alarming report reached the desk of General Henry Hap Arnold, the commander of the entire Army Air Forces, putting the Tuskegee Airmen's future in jeopardy. All the arduous training and immense sacrifices made by these trailblazing aviators now hung in the balance. Charles Hall's hard-won victory was on the verge of being erased by a biased report from a prejudiced commander. However, fate intervened in the form of the Anzio beachhead, a bloody battleground. In January 1944, Allied forces clung desperately to a sliver of Italian coastline, facing relentless Luftwaffe attacks. It was a chaotic, life-or-death struggle. On January 27, the call went out for every available fighter, and the 99th Pursuit Squadron was scrambled. 15 Tuskegee pilots in their outdated P-40s flew into a sky swarming with superior German Focke-Wulf 190s. Outnumbered and outgunned, they should have broken and fled, according to the report. But they didn't. Instead, they charged into the German formations with a ferocity that stunned all who witnessed it. Over the course of 2 grueling days of aerial combat above the beaches, the Tuskegee Airmen had shot down a staggering 12 German fighters. Lieutenant Charles Hall accounted for 2 more, bringing his personal tally to 3 downed enemy aircraft. Captain Limu Custis also claimed another kill. Pilot after pilot registered impressive aerial victories. In just 48 hours, they had destroyed more enemy planes than in their entire previous 7 months of combat combined. This remarkable performance, so completely at odds with the timid assessment in earlier reports, could no longer be ignored. Compelled to investigate, the War Department launched a statistical analysis comparing the 99th Fighter Squadron's combat record to other P-40 units in the theater. The conclusion was undeniable. When factoring in their equipment and the nature of their missions, The Tuskegee Airmen were performing just as well, if not better, than their white counterparts. The experiment had proven a resounding success. Here is the paraphrased text. In May 1944, a new chapter unfolded for the 99th Fighter Squadron. They were combined with 3 other Tuskegee-trained units, the 100th, 301st, and 302nd, to form the 332nd Fighter Group. This consolidated force was then transferred to the 15th Air Force in Italy, where they were entrusted with a formidable new mission, long-range bomber escort. Their task was to fly deep into the heart of Nazi Germany, guiding vast formations of B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators to their targets and back. This was the big league, one of the most perilous and demanding jobs a pilot could undertake. Colonel Benjamin Davis assembled his men at their new base in Ramitelli, knowing this would be the ultimate test for the 332nd. The Tuskegee Airmen had proven their mettle at Anzio. Now they had the chance to demonstrate their ability to protect the Allied bombers on these treacherous missions over enemy territory. It was a daunting challenge, but one the 332nd Fighter Group was determined to meet head-on. He established a new directive and unwavering principle that would come to define their approach. "Our mission is not to be aces," he told them. "Forget chasing enemy fighters for personal glory. Our job is to bring those bombers home. We will stick with the bombers no matter what." This was a radical departure from the norm. Most American fighter groups operated on a more aggressive doctrine, urging pilots to roam and hunt to rack up kills. Davis demanded discipline over glory. He understood that the true measure of their success wouldn't be the number of swastikas painted on their planes, but the number of bomber crews who made it home for dinner. In the midst of the tumultuous air battles over Europe, the 15th Air Force issued a directive for all fighter groups to adorn their aircraft with distinctive markings for easy recognition. The 392nd Fighter Group was assigned the vibrant color red as their identifying hue. They did not simply add a small stripe, but rather painted the entire tail section of their brand new P-51 Mustangs in a brilliant, unmistakable crimson. Complemented by red propeller spinners and nosebands, these planes became a striking splash of color against the cold, gray European skies. The legendary red tails were born. At first, the white bomber crews were unaware of the identity of these new escort fighters. They did not realize these pilots were African American. All they knew was that something had changed. These red-tailed fighters did not immediately peel off in pursuit of German aircraft at the first opportunity, as was the norm. Instead, they remained steadfastly by the bombers' sides, providing unwavering protection throughout the perilous missions. The 332nd Fighter Group, known as the Red Tails, provided unwavering protection to the vulnerable Allied bombers during the war. These pilots were like guardian angels, guarding the lumbering aircraft with fierce dedication. If a bomber was damaged and fell behind, the Red Tails would peel off and fight off the attackers, ensuring the stricken plane made it safely home. Word of the Red Tails' heroic exploits spread rapidly through the bomber bases in Italy. Crews eagerly awaited the news of their escort, as the presence of the 332nd brought a wave of relief. Bomber groups began specifically requesting the Red Tails for their most perilous missions, recognizing the invaluable protection they offered. These men, once deemed unfit for combat, had become the most sought-after protectors in the skies. The Tuskegee Airmen's rigorous training and Colonel Davis's unwavering leadership had forged their exceptional discipline, which was now paying dividends by saving American lives. Remarkably, they were losing fewer bombers to enemy fighters than any other escort group in the 15th Air Force. The final statistics were staggering. On average, other P-51 groups lost 46 bombers under their watch, while the Red Tails lost only 27. However, their greatest challenge was yet to come. By March 1945, the Luftwaffe had become a shadow of its former self. But Germany had one last terrifying weapon: the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. This technological marvel, with a top speed of over 540 miles per hour, was a daunting 100 miles per hour faster than the P-51 Mustang, posing a formidable threat to Allied pilots. The 392nd Squadron faced an immense challenge on March 24, 1945. Their mission was to escort a fleet of B-17 bombers on a 1,600-mile round trip to Berlin, where they would target the Daimler-Benz tank factory. This was the longest flight they had ever undertaken, leading them deep into enemy territory. Intelligence reports warned that the target was being defended by Jägerschwadron 7, an elite unit equipped with the formidable Me-262 jet fighters. Colonel Davis himself led the 43 Mustang fighters on this perilous mission. As they neared Berlin, the dreaded German jets appeared, forming the largest formation ever assembled for a single battle. The turbine engines of the Me-262s screamed through the sky, but the experienced pilots of the 392nd were prepared. They had studied the jet's weaknesses and were ready to confront this silver shark that could strike and vanish before a propeller-driven pilot could react. Here is the paraphrased text. The P-51 Mustang was faster, but it lacked the agility of the German jets. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown recalled their strategic approach. Aware that the enemy aircraft outpaced them, they deliberately maneuvered away from the German jets, then turned to attack their blind spots. As a Luftwaffe fighter swooped in, Brown and his wingmen would veer not towards it, but in the opposite direction, forcing the German pilot to overshoot. In that moment, they would swiftly pivot their Mustangs and pursue the jet as it sped past, enabling Brown to open fire. I pulled up at him in a 15-degree climb and fired 3 long bursts, his combat report stated. The German pilot was soon forced to bail out, 1 jet downed. That same day, Lieutenant Earl Lane achieved the seemingly impossible, striking in Me-262 from over half a mile away with an expertly timed deflection shot. Lieutenant Charles Bradley secured a 3rd aerial victory in a single afternoon, as the Red Tails downed 3 of Hitler's cutting-edge jets. This remarkable feat surpassed the total number of enemy aircraft destroyed by many American fighter squadrons over the entire war. In recognition of this extraordinary accomplishment, the 332nd Fighter Group received the prestigious Distinguished Unit Citation, one of the military's highest accolades. They had confronted and triumphed over the future of aerial warfare. The initial mockery from Luftwaffe pilots had long since given way to a somber, grudging respect, with the Tuskegee Airmen earning the nickname Schwarze Vogelmenschen, or Black Birdmen. However, not every pilot's journey ended in victory, as 32 Tuskegee Airmen were shot down and taken prisoner. The capture of Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson in southern France during the summer of 1944 revealed the unsettling depth of German intelligence. When the American pilot was interrogated, he was stunned to discover that his captors possessed intimate details about his personal life, including information about his family and the airfield where he was stationed. This alarming level of knowledge left Jefferson feeling deeply unsettled, as the Germans seemed to know everything about him and the experiment he was involved in. Ultimately, he was sent to the notorious Stalag prison camp, where the full absurdity of his situation truly dawned on him. Inside a Nazi POW camp, the white American bomber crewmen treated him as an equal, shaking his hand and expressing gratitude for the protection provided by his unit's red-tailed fighters. Jefferson found a level of integration there that he had never experienced in America. Upon liberation and return to American soil, however, he was immediately segregated from the white soldiers, despite having fought and nearly died for his country. He had been honored as an equal by his German prison camp comrades, only to face the same demeaning prejudice back home. While the war against fascism had been won, the battle against racism remained far from over. The final accounting revealed a stunning repudiation of every falsehood that had been propagated about them. Over 15,000 individual combat sorties, 178 missions completed, 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial engagements, another 150 enemy planes annihilated on the ground. They even sank a German destroyer using only machine gun fire. 96 pilots earned the prestigious Distinguished Flying Cross, and their bomber escort record was unparalleled. Yet, their greatest triumph was not quantified in statistics. It was measured in the profound change they compelled from a reluctant nation. Their performance provided irrefutable evidence that a pilot's skin color had no bearing on his flying and fighting capabilities. The Tuskegee Airmen's distinguished combat record proved to be a powerful tool for civil rights advocates following the war. This record was a key factor in President Harry Truman's 1948 decision to issue Executive Order 9981, officially desegregating the United States Armed Forces. What had begun as an experimental program had now become the architects of a revolutionary transformation. However, recognition for their achievements came slowly, with their story largely forgotten by mainstream America for decades. It wasn't until 2007 that the Tuskegee Airmen were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the nation's highest civilian honor, by which time only 300 of the original pilots remained to receive it. Yet, their legacy had already been etched in history, in the contrails of their Mustang fighters over Berlin and the grateful memories of the thousands of bomber crews they had safely escorted home. The courageous deeds of these individuals were woven into the very fabric of the American military and society, forever transforming both. As Roscoe Brown, the pilot who shot down a German jet over Berlin, eloquently expressed, "Our fight extended beyond the enemy. We battled ignorance, prejudice, and hatred, and emerged victorious on all fronts." Facing insurmountable odds and low expectations, these trailblazers defied their doubters and achieved the unimaginable, soaring to unprecedented heights.